Greetings everyone, what's up? Evan here, back again. Today I'm going to be bringing you a $1,000 gaming PC computer build based around the new Intel Skylake CPU architecture and the R9 390X. So I'm not sure if you can still continue to call Skylake new. I guess it is the newest architecture from Intel, but I believe it's been around about 6 months now or more, so maybe we should stop calling Skylake new. I'm not sure. Anyway, we're going to get right into the components here today that I've hand-selected that I believe is going to give you the best price-to-performance ratio and value for your money. So to start off here today, we're going to have the Intel Core i5-6600K 3.5 GHz quad-core processor. Now at $1,000, it is possible to get an i7 into this build. It's also possible to put more money towards your graphics card and instead get the lower-end Intel Core i5-6500 or 6600 non-K edition. Intel does, for some reason, like to charge an extra $50 to $60 just for making their CPUs unlocked, which, in my opinion, is kind of an artificial limitation that Intel likes to put in just so that you have to pay more to overclock your CPU. Recently, we saw a lot of board manufacturers that released updates that show that these CPUs, the i5-6400, 6500, 6600 non-K editions, can all overclock very, very well. Some people were getting 4.5 gigahertz up from 3.2 gigahertz on these stock things. Well, Intel sent out a micro update, either through Windows Update or basically twisting the arm of the board manufacturer and said, do not allow this anymore. And since then, I believe most of the manufacturers have released that update. However, if you don't update your BIOS, you might be able to get away with overclocking on non-Z series boards and non-K series chips, but just to be safe, I always like to buy the i5-6600K K edition CPU if you're going to be playing on overclocking. I personally prefer the option to overclock. Some people might not like that idea and should instead opt for, say, the 6600K or 6500K non-overclockable edition. The reason I didn't decide to go with an i7 is because a lot of games really are not going to benefit from an i7. I've seen several benchmarks and I've seen several comparisons that show that even the most CPU-intensive games really are not going to utilize the 8 threads or 4 virtual threads that the i7 includes. Of course, the Intel Core i5 is a solely quad-core processor. It does not include hyper-threading. We scroll down here. I believe it says, yeah, hyper-threading, no. So we have that problem, or that limitation on the Intel Core i5, but if you overclock this CPU, you should have no problem getting up to 4.5 gigahertz, and it's going to be offering a ton of performance per dollar, and more than enough for just about any game that you're going to be playing. If you're more interested in having a computer do things in addition to gaming, such as rendering, modeling, any other CPU-intensive tasks, you might want to look into an i7 and take a little bit out of your GPU. But the Core i5, of course, is still going to handle most of those tasks very, very well, and it's a very, very powerful CPU processor. So I think it's one of the best bang for your buck options, even at the $1,000 price point. Moving on, that does not include a stock CPU cooler, and if you're going to be on a stock CPU cooler and overclocking you, that's probably not the best way to go anyway. So what I have here is the CryoRig H7 49.0 CFM CPU cooler. What we see from the CryoRig CPU cooler is some very similar performance to the Hyper 212 Evo. The Hyper 212 Evo was a bit cheaper. This actually performs a bit better, at least from some of the reviews that I've seen, than the Hyper 212 Evo. Plus, in my opinion, the 212 Evo kind of looks like crap. It's a good CPU cooler. It probably performs better on some of the cooler running CPUs. You really don't want to have a Hyper 212 Evo when you're going to be highly overclocking, say, an AMD system. But that's true for pretty much all of the air cooling options anyway. However, this CPU cooler has a very, very high rating. It should be more than enough to cool this CPU. Skylake doesn't run particularly hot anyway. It has great reviews and, in my opinion, looks a bit better than the Hyper 212 Evo anyway. If you want to go with the Hyper 212, that's always an option. Or you want to go with liquid cooling, that's also an option. A cooler is really something that it's hard to pinpoint the best performance per dollar and the best way that you want it to look or go and work with the aesthetics in your case. This is more of a personal preference, just like shopping for a case is going to be. The goal of these builds is not really to focus on the parts that can be interchangeable based on opinion, and more so focus on just the parts that run or go towards performance more so than anything else. For a motherboard, we've got an ASRock Z170 Pro 4S ATX LGA 1151 motherboard. Going to go ahead and visit the Newegg page here. This is one of the cheapest Z170 boards you can get, but it still has a fantastic rating of 5 out of 5 eggs. I believe this supports Crossfire. I'm not sure if it supports SLI. No SLI support, but it does support Crossfire, which is good because we're going with the AMD side of things anyway. It supports USB 3.0. It supports it supports USB 3.0 front panel and rear panel. Got an 8-pin CPU power connector, LGA 1151, of course. PCI slots, 2 3.0 times 16. Also appears to be 3 PCIe times 1 slots. Supports all the way up to DDR4 3866 overclocked, 24-pin ATX power connector. SATA 6 GB per second, and a whole bunch of extra SATA connectors down here. Really, it's a great board for the money. It's the Intel Z170 chipset, so you're going to be able to have no problem overclocking your CPU with this board. It has great reviews, and we're really actually starting to see some price drops with these boards itself. It used to be before that a Z170 board will run you $100 minimum, absolute bare bones minimum. Now we're seeing boards drop down into the $80 range minimum, and you can get a really high quality board for $100, $120 if you're going to be building a higher end system even than this. But I believe for the money, you're getting plenty of frills, you're getting plenty of options, and you should have no problem even expanding upon and upgrading with this board in the future, should you see fit. If you want to upgrade to an i7 in the future, if you want to add another 390X in the future, or switch over to some other form of graphics card, such as Polaris, which is coming out soon, go right ahead. This is a great board to kind of build your computer base off of, and it should last you a very long time. For memory, we've got 16 gigabytes of 2 times 8 gigabytes DDR4 2133 memory. Nothing particularly special about this memory, it's just 16 gigs of DDR4 memory, which is great. We're kind of getting further and further away from the whole DDR3 thing, and I believe even the next AMD CPUs will natively support DDR4, which is going to be a great step up from the previous generation, as DDR4 consumes less power and runs a lot faster at a lot higher clock speed. This memory isn't particularly special, it's just one of the cheapest options you can get for on PC Parts Picker right now, but it doesn't mean it is a good quality memory, and it should serve you just fine. Some people say that 8 gigs is enough for a gaming system. I'm starting to kind of disagree with that. It is enough for a lower end system, but when you're starting to get into this higher end $1,000 price point, I'd really prefer to have 16 gigs of RAM just so that you're not limited in other applications, such as, video rendering, editing, that sort of thing. I noticed in my PC currently, which only has 8 gigs of RAM, if you're running a screen recorder and Grand Theft Auto 5 multiplayer with a lot of entities, a lot of stuff blowing up, I have seen it get up to around 6 gigs of memory usage. If I was running something else in the background, which I typically am, such as Discord or Skype or some of that thing, the memory usage gets dangerously close, and that's not something that I like to see. But for 16 gigs of RAM, you should be more than enough for a gaming PC build and allow you to venture off into some other options in the future. For storage, we've got a dual storage system here. For our first storage device is going to be a Kingston SSD at 120 gigabytes, 2.5-inch solid-state drive. Great drive, has great reviews, you can see here, and really, the price has dropped an amazing amount. You can get 120 gigs of SSD storage for $40, and this is not the only option. It's just one of the most well-known and one of the best performing options that I could find for the money. Really, it's great that we're seeing flash memory get more and more mainstream, and hard drive prices still dropping. And I think within the next 5 years, mechanical hard drives will basically be a thing of the past, which, honestly, I'm fine with. Mechanical hard drives tend to fail far too often. Whenever you have mechanical parts, they tend to last a lot less than the solid-state drives actually last. And overall, I think SSDs are going to just take over the market, and we will see mechanical hard drives go bye-bye, except for maybe some incredibly mass storage things. We'll see drives in the 6 to 8 terabyte range, probably before they get phased out entirely. But that doesn't mean they need to be phased out entirely right now. We've got a Seagate Barracuda 1 terabyte, 3.5-inch, 7200 RPM internal hard drive. This will serve as extra storage for your videos, your games, your library, all your other stuff that isn't basically your most used applications or your operating system, which will be installed in the SSD to give you faster boot times and overall faster loading performance. It's always great to have one of these. I have a 1 terabyte Hitachi drive that I use right now solely for video editing and recording, and let me tell you, it is a lifesaver. My internal main drive is only a 600 gig hard drive, and that filled up very, very quickly. With a combination of recording with fraps and HD video, rendering videos, and of course your massive Steam library, which you just inevitably accrue over time. Having an extra 1 terabyte drive definitely helps with all of that. Now, always a point of contestment, but one of the most fun things to talk about, we've got the XFX Radeon R9 390X 8GB double dissipation video card. This video card is a great video card for the money. It's actually on promotional. It's about $30 off right now, so it's only $369, and you get a further $30 rebate card, so your total will be about $340. The XFX makes a very quality product. The R9 390 is recommended by websites such as Tom's Hardware, and also as based upon its pass mark scores and other benchmarks over competitors such as the 980. Overall, I believe this is a very good card for the price point. As you can see, it supports up to 8 gigabytes of 512-bit GDDR5, 1060 MHz core clock, 2,816 stream processors, and you get a free gift of AMD gift of Hitman. I think that's the new Hitman game that just came out recently, or is coming out very soon. Anyway, this is a great video card for this price point. In my opinion, $400 is really something about the maximum that you would want to spend on your GPU. Because once you get into this price point, you can kind of stop investing that even amount into your CPU and GPU, because your GPU is going to be the deciding factor, and your CPU kind of starts to take more of a backseat once you've reached that maximum. And games that are running at 1440p or maxed out, this will completely max out games at 1080p, and you'll be able to run on high to ultra settings also at 1440p. Not really a standalone 4K solution, although that is an option if you really want to, but $2,000 price point is probably more the price point that you want to go for if you're looking for 4K. Overall, I think it's a great graphics card, has good reviews, and it's cheap right now, so might as well pick it up. Moving on, for case, I went with a Deepcool TESSERACT BF ATX mid-tower case. I'm going to go ahead and view the Newegg page here, just go over some very basic features and stuff. Go ahead and view some of the images so you can get a good look at it if this is a case that you might be interested in. If you're not, don't worry about it. Buy whatever case you want, throw it into your cheap Dell case, whatever you think you can fit it into, that's just fine. You can honestly, if you're sitting in front of any sort of desktop right now, I think I've said this before in these gaming PC builds, you can probably reuse, maybe not the power supply for something that draws as much power, but you can probably reuse your case, which will save you $20, $30, $40, depending on how much you want to invest in your case. But this supports USB 3.0, includes a rear 120mm case fan, looks great, has plenty of cooling solutions, as you can see, and overall, I believe it's just a really good case for the money, and has good reviews. As you can see, there's the USB 3.0 front panel connector, and yeah, I think it's a good case to go with at this price point. $40 is about the average price I would say that should be allocated to a case if you're not on an extremely limited budget. You want to put in more and we're going to get a full ATX tower, you can. If you want to put in less, you don't care about USB 3.0, you can absolutely do that as well. Cases like the CPU cooler, as I mentioned before, are kind of just those personal preference things. Does it match your case? Does it match your motherboard? Do you care about how it looks, or do you just want it to hold all your parts together? That's kind of the basis of what I go off of. Next up, we have an EVGA 850 watts, 80 plus bronze certified semi-modular ATX power supply. This is great because it's semi-modular. It's also great because it's EVGA, which also always makes it a very solid power supply. Runs at 850 watts, which should give you plenty of overhead, and it's bronze certified, which means it's about 80% to 85% efficient. EVGA has always made a quality product, as I mentioned before, and I believe that's always a good thing to go with. They also seem to be the cheaper. I usually include Antec, Corsair, EVGA, XFX, Seasonic, and a couple other manufacturers when I just go through and look at what's the cheapest price for performance. And EVGA usually holds that rating. I think most, if not all of my builds so far on this channel have featured an EVGA power supply, or maybe a Roswell power supply if I included it in the case itself. But our grand total comes out to about $1,001.60. I usually try to get it just about as close as possible, and that's about as close as I could get it. Leave a comment below and let me know what you thought of this gaming PC build. If you thought it was great, if you thought it sucked, I don't care. Just let me know. I love talking and discussing PC parts in the comment section. It's always enjoyable. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.